Good afternoon. Welcome to Deering Live. It's a wonderful Thursday, and welcome back to everyone. We missed you last week, but we're so happy to see everybody here again this week. This week's going to be a fun one, I think. First of all, hi, Dave. How you doing?
All right. Hey.
Thank you for being with us as always. But this week on Deering Live, we'd very much like to welcome old-time banjo master, Mr. Riley Baugus. For those of you who do know Riley, you will know that him for his playing in the round peak style, which is a style of banjo that comes from his home county in North Carolina. Riley has recorded with Robert Plant, Willie Nelson, Alison Kraus, and many more, and he also sang on the Academy Award-nominated soundtrack for the movie Cold Mountain. Please welcome, everybody, Mr. Riley Baugus. Riley, how are you doing?
You know, if I was any better, I don't know if you could stand me.
Yeah, we could.
Doing pretty well. Doing pretty well, thanks.
We were just having a wonderful conversation backstage. I like to call it backstage.
Yeah, well, it is backstage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was really fun, and I have to say that I'm really impressed to see both the Union Jack and Old Glory on your wall behind you there. That's impressive.
I have to.
I know. I hear you.
Yeah, we were just talking about that same thing, and England got through to the Euro finals yesterday in the soccer, so I've got to be a little patriotic towards them, as well as my adopted home country of the good old US of A. So
there you go.
Gotta love it. All right, so let's kick things off with the way we normally do. We're going to invite you to play a wonderful song of your choosing, and then we'll start getting into some real cool banjo talk. How's that sound?
Sounds awesome. Sounds great.
Right.
I'll tell you what I think I'll do. First of all, I'll tune the banjo, because that's what you do when you're a banjo player. You spend way more of your life tuning than actually playing.
For the record, he had tuned it. This is all for show, just to kind of keep up with the stereotype. Yeah.
Well, I often tell the story. I make banjos, you know, and so I make the banjos that I play usually. And I was doing a show in a little town in North Carolina one night, and I was working with a couple of singer-songwriters. Now, singer-songwriters do not adhere to the same rules in terms of playing music that old-time musicians do, because we'll tune to D or to A or whatever key we're playing in, and we'll play there for 45 minutes or an hour and then tune to the other key, you know? So, but singer-songwriters change keys for every song. Well, these ladies that I was playing with, all night long, it was a different key every song. So I'm retuning, I'm working the tuners, you know, wearing them out, and get done, and I go to lay my banjo down in the case, and this little lady comes walking up to me, and she says, Now, honey, that was awfully nice. And I said, well, thank you, ma'am. I'm glad you enjoyed it. She said, one thing, though, you might consider buying yourself a better banjo, one you don't have to tune so much, which made me feel really good as a banjo maker, you know, that kind of
You need those old the old robo tuners, you know, that Gibson used to fit onto their guitars for a while there, and just like hit the button and it tunes everything up.
Well, there was a guy who used to follow me, and he always was trying to get me to invent some kind of thing like a strimmer or a weed eater has, where you just beat it on the ground and the new string goes into place. You know.
There you go. All right, what are you gonna play for us, Riley?
All right, I'm gonna play you this tune that comes from the Round Peak area, Surry County, North Carolina. We play it up there, and it's called John Brown's Dream.
Perfect. Take it away.
Oh yeah, fantastic! Great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here, David. Thank you. Thank you.
It sounds great. So how'd you first get into playing the banjo?
Well, my family is all from a little mountain community over in Allegheny County, which is the county right next to Surry County in North Carolina. It's a little further up into the Blue Ridge. The Surry County is kind of the foothills, and Allegheny County is right up actually into the Blue Ridge Mountains proper, and so they always enjoyed string music. It's what they called string music. Anything that had to do with banjos and fiddles and mandolins and guitars and basses and dancing and that kind of thing. String music. So they loved bluegrass and old time and any kind of folky ballady type thing and so there was always music around and I don't know I saw um, how they revered musicians. When
Right.
when Paul Miles, who was a banjo player with a very famous uh, group back in the 1930s called the Red Fox Chasers. Paul Miles was a friend of my grandmother, and my grandfather, and he lived in the community there. And whenever he wasn't around, they'd say, "No, that's Paul Miles. He's a really good banjo player. You ought to get to know him. You need to pay attention to him. He's good. He's a good banjo picker."
Mm-hmm.
And so that always impressed me how much they thought of the man, even though he was old at that point and hadn't played the banjo in many many years. But they still remembered him and what he was able to do with an instrument and how famous he had become because of it. Um, so I don't know. It just kind of intrigued me. I was fascinated by the music, uh, but then the actual playing of it was like, oh, this is something I need to do. So my dad and I built me a banjo, just out of some scrap wood that we had laying around the house here. The neck was like 1 inch thick pine board, and the rim he made out of a piece of plastic molding that he cut out. He took a jigsaw and cut out two wooden circles out of 1/2 inch thick plywood, and he took that plastic molding and nailed it around those two circles, and there was the sound chamber, and then we
Right.
attached that neck, and I had a guitar. I saved my money when I was that summer, and I had bought a guitar from Sears Roebuck. I did that real old time thing where, because that was all I knew you're supposed to do. You're supposed to buy your first guitar from Sears Roebuck. So
Right.
so I did. I saved my money and bought a guitar through the catalog at Sears, and so when it came time to build this banjo, my dad just laid that guitar neck up to the banjo neck, and took a pencil and marked where the frets went, and then took a hacksaw and sawed the fret slots. And there was a music store over in town called Resnick's back in those days, and they've been out of business for 40 years, but they sold pre-cut guitar fret wire. So we went and got some fret wire and hammered those things in there and glued them and everything. And he took his pocket knife and carved tuning pegs out of some maple stove wood we had laid on the front porch. So that was my first banjo, and I still have it hanging over here on the wall somewhere. Uh, but that's how I got into it. I just thought it was cool.
Yeah. And
I thought that people would revere me if I became good at playing music, and boy
right,
was I
right.
wrong. No.
It's great, and coming from a place with a rich musical, culture like yours, and where the banjo is very important, then it's not just pop. There's a tradition that you can really attach yourself to and grow up listening to and be a part of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I often tell people that uh, songs like Little Maggie and things like John Brown's Dream and different tunes. The old folks that I would hang out with, like Tommy Gerald, was one of them. I spent a lot of time with Tommy when I was a young teenager, and he would tell about. Well, I remember when that tune come into this country. He would say, You know, meaning I remember when that tune first showed up on our scene, and we
Mm-hmm.
learned to play it. Well, that to them was pop music. You
Yeah.
know, that old time music, the traditional music that we now know as these archaic relics, that was somebody's pop music, and for them, that's
Definitely.
exactly what it was.
Yeah. And it's, having that chance to, you mentioned, kind of learn from Tommy Jarrell, somebody like that. That's, incredible opportunity. What kind of things did you learn when from him, from, a master
Well, I learned
of
a
this
lot
style of
about
music?
drinking strong coffee, and that you could use Seven Dust to kill the fleas on your dog. No, I don't recommend. I don't recommend that. The strong coffee, yes. The Seven Dust, no. Uh, no, he would, you know, he was really good about showing you tunes, but he would show you how to play it, not necessarily teach you how to play it. He would show you what he did in terms of, well, you do that little thing right there, you know. But he wouldn't really slow it down and say, okay, now we're going to take our index finger and slide it from the first fret to the second fret. While it wasn't a lesson with Tommy. Wasn't really necessarily like a lesson that we would in the same way we think about them today. Where everything is broken down to the smallest fraction. It was largely going and hanging out and playing tunes. You know, you'd
Right.
sit and you'd play music for hours and hours and hours, and every time you go, it was largely the same repertoire. So you didn't just have one chance to hear a tune and learn it. You had every encounter with the old folks that you went to visit. Because there was no YouTube or
Mm-hmm.
CDs or flash drives or for them to learn from. So they learned in real time at full speed, and they would show you in real time at as close to full speed as you were capable of absorbing. But they had a limited repertoire. So they played the same tunes. They didn't learn a new tune every week or five new tunes every week like a lot of people like to do now. You know, they didn't have huge repertoires. So, maybe 50 to 100 tunes would encapsulate the entire repertoire of a region.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right. Yeah.
so you had lots of chances to learn. So when you'd sit down and you'd say, a lot of times Tommy would say things like, "Now, have you heard the way they play so and so over yonder at the Fiddlers Convention or whatever? They don't play it right. Here's the way you're supposed to play it." And he would show you what he thought would be the way that something should be played, because
Right.
that's the way he heard it and understood it. Uh, but each individual player in our area, I got to spend time with Dix Freeman too, who was another great climber banjo player. He was another Round Peak style banjo player, lived in Round Peak, and his style was, although it was the same style as Tommy played, they played very differently. And if you listen to a lot of the players, like Fred Cockerham or Kyle Creed, who were both great Round Peak style banjo players, neither of them played like Fred, or Fred or Kyle didn't play like Tommy or Dix. Uh, there's a drive, there's a feeling, there's a flavor that the music has, and there are techniques and approaches, but they didn't necessarily combine all the techniques the same way to create the tune. It was an individual expression on each of their parts. So that's kind of the way I feel that we do music now, or should do music, is that you learn the music and you learn the style, and then you make that piece your own. I like to take that music and say, now this was inspired by so and so's playing, and here's the way I understand their playing of it. So learning from Tommy, uh, like I said, was not like a lesson, but it was learning not only music but a lot about the culture. He loved to tell stories, and going to visit him for me was like going to visit my own grandfather, because they were, the they only lived about 15, 20 miles apart, you know. So it wasn't. I didn't have a cultural hurdle to jump. You know, it was just like going and being close to the music that I'd heard all my life.
Right. And that's it's so important to learn that way, to learn with your ears,
Absolutely.
and keep them, and to not be like what you said. You put your own stamp on it, and not just try to replicate exactly. So many times today, people, especially from learning from tablature and things, they're trying to learn, play everything exactly, but the kind of it loses the soul of the music a little bit. Um,
Well,
and
even a lot of these old guys, they'd say, "Well, I learned this. I play this tune exactly the way I learned it off of so and so." Well, but if you heard the so and so play it that they learned it from, they played it differently, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and so they weren't telling a lie by saying, "Well, I play this tune just the way I learned it," because that's absolutely true. They play it the way they learned it, not necessarily the way they were taught it.
right, right. It's the way they interpreted it,
That's right.
whether correct or right or wrong. It's
That's
the
right.
way,
That's
and then
right.
it's like a
That's the way,
story.
boy.
And it just changes over time. And where do you kind of draw the line of like, because of putting your own stamp on a tune and then just kind of doing it like not doing it right, just doing it kind of doing something. Where is that line of just being
Uh,
lazy and doing it sloppy and
well,
versus putting your flavor into it?
yeah. See, that's what people think. That a lot of times, if you there it is. I got the noise canceling off now. I can hear. Uh, uh, yeah, a lot of people think that well, if you say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to make it my own," that means that I'm just going to play it any way I want to, and that's not my approach at all. It's that line is a hard place to find. You see,
Hmm.
that there is the tradition, there is the, but you also have the flavor and the history, and you have the drive, and you've got all this stuff you've got to maintain. But then you hear different things in the music. You hear a different way of resolving a line, or you might, instead of a slide, you might do a double note and then a hammer on, instead of a slide. It, the changes that I make tend to be subtle, but big. If you're saying, well, I'm going to play this tune exactly like this version that I learned. Well, you can learn the version, but still not play it exactly the same note for note. Um, Music is bigger in my mind than just its individual notes. It's a piece. That's not to say that you're going to take every note and play it in exactly the same place as that person played it. You're going to take that piece as a whole and try and play it the way that person played it. So there are going to be some places where you're not going to interpret it exactly the same way. That's kind of where I am. I mean, it's there, and two, we live in a different time. You have to, as an old time musician now, you have to take the music in this century. You're taking that music from old and you're playing it now. You can't unhear Jimi Hendrix or the Grateful Dead, and you can't unhear Yngwie Malmsteen. I mean, it's like if you've ever heard. I mean, that's obscure, but if you've ever heard this, if you've ever heard music, it's in there, and
Yeah.
and it's a hard thing to filter it all the time. So you might have something that happens that's not totally the way that Tommy or Dick or Fred or Kyle or Boggy Cockrum or whoever played it. You're gonna have something that's different, and then it becomes the normal for you because it's the way you interpret it, the way you feel it, the way it comes out when you play it. But it's still traditional.
Yeah.
You know, you asked me a hard question, so I gave you a long, convoluted
Yeah.
answer to say I don't know.
Have you had these conversations when you played? I mean, you've played with Robert Plant and I think John Paul Jones too.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
have you had these conversations with them at all? Because they built their a lot of their career in Led Zeppelin, playing blues tunes.
Well,
And-
I was, I was, I was. I was having a conversation with John one time, and I said, "Yeah," I said, John, I said the sort of the world that we come from, you get a lot of people telling you that you have to play this music note for note exactly the way it was in a recording session in 1927, or you're not playing it correctly." And he said, he said something to the effect of, "Riley, you should have seen you should have seen how they approached us, or how they treated us because of that." But because they were totally going on in a different direction with that American blues music, So
Yeah.
said, yeah, they were so yeah, he understood. He
Right. Right.
understood what I was trying to say exactly.
Getting back into specifics on the banjo of your style of the round peak style, especially how do you describe like what that is? How do you explain what that is? How is it different than just than other types of clawhammer playing?
Well, it's not your standard sort of frailing where I kind of think of frailing, and I teach this in my classes. I could be totally wrong, but this is my take on it. I tend to think of frailing clawhammer banjo as being offbeat, sort of centric, where you would go and where you're starting on the and a one or the diddy bum, diddy bum, diddy bum.
Uh-huh.
In the round peak style, we tend to sort of think, or I do, I tend to think of it as bum diddy, where the main emphasis is on the melody note on the beat, but you have a lot of pickups, you have a lot of lead ins, um, musically, that you might you might have a and a one lead in, but then the melody is back on the beat, always on the bum. Um, so it's not sort of a straight frailing style, in that the emphasis is on the beat rather than the offbeat. It's and it We tend to do a lot of drop thumb. I hear a lot of drop thumb patterns in it to get those eighth notes that sort of make up a melodic line, but it's not overly melodic. It's largely, I always describe it as hitting the high spots that the fiddle player plays. You don't want to We don't want to play every note that the fiddle player plays, but we want to get the high spots of the melody while
Right.
providing a nice rhythm. You want to provide the fiddle player something, a good backing to play to, a good rhythmic backing, but you also, you're keeping up with the melody at the same time. So it's about the drive. There's a there's it a lot of times, a lot of tunes, when you start into the A part of a tune, you play slightly on the front edge of the beat sometimes, but then you immediately fall right back onto the beat.
Hmm.
So you're playing just milliseconds ahead of the beat, and I don't know. I kind of think that is because the music was meant for dancing,
Hmm.
and before there were sound systems and the ability to adjust delay in a hall. You would you'd start on you'd get the music to the dancer a millisecond before that beat was supposed to happen. So then
Uh-huh.
everybody got synced.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
there's that little drive, that little jump in the first beat. You know, but that drive happens all through the music. So you've got that pushing. It's it's pushing and still on the beat at the same time. You know.
Right. And are you doing a number of pull-offs without striking it with your right hand too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get I personally get a lot of notes, um, by doing pull offs and what I call a double note. You know, um, we do a rhythmic fill like that. is a terrible example of what I was trying to say. I chose the wrong tune. Uh, so yeah, there are lots of pull offs that work in conjunction with the drop thumbs. So
Right.
you can get yet another note in a line without having it sound like a melodic right hand line where you're playing an individual note with every finger every time. And so you might have a drop thumb followed by a pull off, or a strike, pull off, and then replace. So you get you know,
Yeah. And it allows you to play off the beat notes off the beat a little bit more too, so it's not
that,
so downbeat oriented.
that is correct. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. It keeps that. I think that might give it some more of that drive and some more, just something
Yeah,
to
that
keep
push,
pushing it
that
forward. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's you rarely ever find yourself dragging. You
Hmm.
know, you're always kind of pushing and anticipating that next part rolling around. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're ready, here we go. That kind of thing. So it's easier
And do
to
you?
play it and show you than to talk about it. It's
Yeah.
nomenclature
Yeah.
for a lot of this stuff is really difficult to come up with for me.
Yeah. 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 I remember some books when I started of they all had different kind of nomenclature for the clawhammer section. The bluegrass sections were pretty standard, but the clawhammer sections were you kind of had to figure it out each time.
Well, I get people talking to me about double thumbing all the time, and they're like, "Oh, well, you did that double thumbing," and I'm like, "No, I didn't double thumb there," because to them, drop thumbing is double thumbing, and to me, double thumbing is when you're playing more than one note on the fifth string.
Ah, gotcha.
You know,
Okay.
so it's all about it's all about how you see it, I reckon.
Yeah. 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 You also sing, a lot with your playing, and it's something that really stands out. Do you practice when you're singing? Practice the melodies with the banjo, getting or how do you go about that?
Uh, why? I don't know. It's just I I find a song that I want to do, or choose a song that we have done in the traditional repertoire, and you just kind of start doing it, and it builds over time. You know, there's one song that I do in particular, and I'll do it in just a minute. That I worked on it for about 4 years before I ever came up with the way that I do it now. I started out just trying to figure out what voicing on the banjo worked best for the tune or for the song, and then where I could sing it, what key worked best for my voice, and then I started figuring out, well, okay, which tuning am I going to use to play in that key, to make this work? So there's a process that goes into it, but I don't think about it too much. It's just what you do to play music. It's like
Hmm.
there's a necessity, and I have to figure out a way to get there. Now let me see. Since I'm a banjo player, what's the easiest way for me to do that? And that's kind of how I approach it. And so I'll sing and then try and figure it out on the banjo usually, or I'll learn a tune and then learn the words to the tune. However it comes. Sometimes the song comes first, sometimes the tune comes first.
Yeah. Well, do you want to play that tune that you're thinking of?
Yeah, it's going to require that I retune the banjo because that's what you do.
What tuning were you in, and where are you going?
Well, I'm going to say that I was in A. All right, even though I'm about a half step low,
Right.
but I'm in A. That
Sure.
confuses people a lot of times. They say, well, we're in G, but we're playing A tunes. Well, how are you playing A tunes in G? Because G, the intervals between the strings or between the notes are the same as they are in A. So my banjo would normally be tuned E A C sharp E, because
Ah,
most of the fiddle tunes in the round peak area are in A and D.
right.
Not to say all, but most. So I kind of start out as my standard tuning is A, which is the same as G with a capo at the second fret. It's exactly
Right.
the same.
But your
And
banjo isn't an A scale banjo. It's just a standard scale, isn't it?
my banjo is 25. I'm playing a 25 and a half
20.
inch scale.
Okay.
Although people play the standard, sort of Gibson 26 and an eighth, they tune those up to A as well. I mean, it it gets sort of like a cheese grater, If
What strings are you using for it
I
to
am
tune that
actually
high?
using a GHS set right now that is 24 for the fourth, 16, what is that, 13 and then 11, or 12 and 10. No, 12 and 11. 13 and 11.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm using what they call a medium set. It's their stainless steel set that has the 24 for the fourth.
Pretty
Only
heavy
because
strings, though.
What's that?
Pretty heavy gauge strings.
Yeah, but they call it medium. That's
Yeah.
that's their GHS stainless medium set, and
Okay.
and I like the tension of it on this 25 and a half inch scale. And if I were my 11-inch banjo that I play, it has a 25-inch scale, which works really well for being in G or in A. It's kind of halfway between the A scale and the bluegrass scale, So
Right. Yeah.
bluegrass
So what
scale,
tuning
but
are we moving to now?
we are moving to A modal.
So like sawmill tuning is the other name for it.
Well, I'm going to finish that statement in just a second. We're moving to A modal, but we're playing with the fifth string down one full step to a G.
Gotcha.
So if you were in G, a lot of people would call this F tuning.
Right.
All right. So because that would, if I were in G, that would be my F chord. My one chord, or the root chord, is actually would be F. In this case, it's going to be G. All right. So it's really I think it's a really cool tune, and it lends itself to singing really well, because you're basically playing guitar chords.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the guitar, you have E, A, D as your three bass strings, and then your first string on the guitar is E.
Right.
So you're just missing the B string and the G string. So you can
Are you
use
doing-
all the other fingers in the same shapes to play your chords. So you're basically playing guitar chords with a clawhammer right hand.
You about to do Undone Sorrow?
I am going to do Undone.
All right. Yeah, I love this tune.
Awesome. Over yonder in the graveyard, where the wildflowers grow, oh, there they lay my own true lover. She's gone from me forevermore. She was fairer than the sweetest flowers, restless as the wildest wind, born with a love deep as ocean. That was the girl I did win. Left her there back in the mountain, see the world riches to gain. But when I returned, no earthly treasures could ease this heart so full of pain. out upon that mountain, neath a little mound of clay, the girl and I returned to marry, so still among flowers did lay. I'll go away and I will wander, lay aside my earthly gains, and I'll not end with a man with riches, undone in sorrow I'll remain, undone in sorrow I'll remain.
Yeah, yeah.
I hope that was
song,
actually in tune. I should have taken out one ear pod.
more authentic then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was kind of in pitch, I think.
No, that was beautiful, and that get chills listening to you play that song. Just listening to it today, it inspired me to pick up and try to learn it on my banjo and guitars today, and so I'm glad you told me the tuning.
Awesome, yeah.
Because I was trying to do it out of G tuning. And,
yeah, no, it's A modal with the fifth string down to G, and then you just play regular guitar shape as if you were the four bass strings, or the three bass strings and then the first string. So,
well, you sure can there's the old Steve Martin bit. You can't play a sad song on a banjo, and that the banjo is the only thing that could save Nixon. But you've proved that wrong. You definitely do a good job at playing a sad song.
Yeah, well, I always took. See, I used to listen to Steve Martin tell that, and then I always took it as a challenge.
Do you approach playing differently when you're playing, a slower kind of more heavy song like that versus a fiddle tune or a dance tune sort of thing?
Yeah, I kicked that one off a little bit faster than what I normally would, but then I was already into it, so I couldn't. I didn't want to change it after I got there.
Sure.
But yeah, I would normally approach a sort of a sensitive, kind of sad, a heavy song like that from sort of a kind of a slower way. Typically, I mean, not always dirgy, but kind of approach it as the song that it is. I kind of try and play with the same weight that the song has, and I'll do one a little later. That's a really heavy song, and it's a modern song. It's actually a song by Ben Nichols. It's The Last Pale Light in the West, and I'll do that a bit later. But it's I tend to use a lot more volume type dynamics. Heavy attacks in places and lighter attacks. I tend to use more melodic lines than I would use if I were playing a fiddle tune. As I discussed earlier, fiddle tune, I would just go straight for the high spots and provide a good solid rhythm and some high spots, without trying to play every note the fiddler's playing. Mm-hmm. But in sort of in a song like that, I kind of, as you say, I kind of go for the heaviness. The heaviness of the song dictates what happens musically. I mean, as it would, I suppose. But
yeah, and that's a song written by Ola Belle Reed, right?
Undone in Sorrow is by Ola Belle Reed. Surely was, yeah.
And
she's from Ashe County, North Carolina, which is right next to Allegheny County. So, my friend Dirk Powell talks about some of his relatives in eastern Kentucky, and I kind of say the same thing about Ola Belle Reed. I think I might be related to her. I just don't know whether it's by blood or by kin, or both. So, kind of thing happens, from time to time, I suppose.
Ken, going into kind of song selection of your repertoire, especially recording and things like that when you're making a record, how do you choose what songs you're going to play or record.
I like songs that move me. If they make me feel something, so some songs address that, and they address that that sort of lonesome, sorrowful feeling that you have, you know, and they kind of remedy that, you know. A lot of times, the kind of song you play is reminiscent of the way you're feeling, and it takes away that feeling. And I used to say, I used to have a friend who would say, "I hate it when you play blues because it makes me depressed." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. Blues makes you feel good." And she would go, "Well, how do you figure that blues makes you feel good?" And I said, "Well, because I know my life is not nearly as bad as the guy in that song.
Right.
You know, the situation in the song is way worse than anything that I'm feeling at that time." No, so,
Right.
but seriously, I do sort of approach the songs from a place that makes me feel something. If it, you know, a lot of the songs have a bravado. You know, it's like that. Yeah, I'm the toughest, whatever, the bravest cowboy that ever tried the West. And a lot of them are like, you know, I'm just lost somewhere out in the universe, and I don't know how to figure it out. And you know, and I do a lot of Doc Boggs songs, which are lonesome and dark,
Yeah.
and they sort of soothe that lonesome, dark feeling that you have. And you know, you can have all those emotions all at the same time. Um, and those, so an entire set of music might remedy you for your emotions for an entire day. You know, uh, so that's kind of how I approach it. You know, when you're making a CD or when you're making a recording, you want to. I like to take people on a journey. I want to get them started, you know, with some upbeat something, and then let's go and start feeling a little more, and then we'll feel a little more, and then maybe we'll come back a little bit, and then maybe go a little darker, and then come back and be you know, on our way back to happiness, you know, or contentment. Never really happiness, but contentment. We might get to happy eventually. You know, but I like to, when I'm doing a recording, that's the way I like to do it. I like to take people on a journey. I like people to feel, as some of my actor friends say, I like them to feel all the feels, you know, because that's what
Yeah.
music does. Music is a way of conveying emotion, and and hopefully manipulating in a positive way the emotions of the listener, and not necessarily manipulating, but because that sounds negative, and I don't mean it that way at all. It's allowing the listener to manipulate their own emotions to go with a song. You know, I don't know.
Hmm.
You hope that the music you play makes people feel.
Yeah.
That's the
It's
simplest
like
way to say it.
any great art, you know, you want them to feel something. You know, you
That's
don't
right.
just want it to be,
That's
you know, a
right.
great movie or a picture or whatever.
Yeah, painting, whatever. Sure, sculpting,
Yeah,
sculpture. Yeah.
sure. Well, I want to start to get into some of the questions in the chat here.
All right.
Let's see. So we have one from Patrick Heffernan. He says, "Hey Riley, can you talk about how banjos are set up for round peak play? Is there a string height above the 12th fret of the fingerboard at the tension hoop that is ideal? How much is too much?"
Well, I can. Well, hey, Patrick. That's a good question. I typically go for 3/16 of an inch at the 12th fret, either over the fret or over the fingerboard, depending on how high you can stand your action. I mine is about 3/16 of an inch. It's going to be hard to see, but mine's about 3/16 of an inch over the 12th fret, actually over the fret. Um, a lot of people will go 3/16 off of the fingerboard. That's kind of a. I've always been told and taught that that was sort of a industry standard, if you will. A lot of people like lower action. I don't think there is too much. A lot of people like higher action. Um, in the round peak style, I'm probably not going to be playing much with the left hand past the 10th fret. You know, if I tune down in G, I'm probably not going to be playing a round peak tune, and I might come as far as the 12th fret to come up the scale to fit a fiddle tune in standard G on the fiddle. But for the most part, I'm going to be playing down here, so the left hand action is not a problem. You know, a little higher action over the bottom of the bottom of the fingerboard above the rim is not a problem. So I don't think there is too much. What I go for is enough height where I want to play that I can get in without hitting the fingerboard and without catching my thumb, and you know, so that there's plenty of finger room, you know, in between the string and the fretboard. So did I get all the facets of that question?
Yeah, definitely. While we're on the topic of banjo setup, what's the banjo head you have on there?
This is a Remo suede, and it happens to be a black one, because I had this idea for making an all black banjo. I got hold of some black mother of pearl, and I sought out a dark star, you know, this black mother of pearl star, and I went, wow, that's a dark star. And then, of course, the light bulb went off, and I thought, oh, Jerry Garcia. Ah, sure.
Right.
Dark star. Yeah, let's do this. Okay, well, let's stain it black now. We got black mother of pearl. Ebony's black. Okay, let's stain the rest of it black. So I went for the whole black stain and French polish finish, and I was talking to my friend Bob Smacula and was getting some parts from him, and I said, man, you know, he said, well, we got these new suede heads from Remo. And he said, we have a black one. I was describing the banjo. I said, oh yeah, let's have the black one. So I put the black head on the dark star banjo. So we're all, you know, good, and it's good and dark. I like the fact that it's all shiny and mirrory inside, but then, you know, nice and flat on the outside.
We have Cindy Green asking about your finger pick that you're using.
Yep.
What pick is that? What kind of pick is that?
This particular pick is an Ernie Ball plastic finger pick, which is extremely difficult to get right now because Ernie Ball is no longer sourcing these picks. Apparently, they lost their source in China, and they don't have a new source, because I've been talking to them, because they're my favorite pick. And Dunlop's work, DeAndrea's work, whatever, you know, your simple Chinese resin pick, any finger pick works. I just cut it off so that it fits the first knuckle. I smooth it up, I round it up, and leave it just long enough that I'm just past the end of my nail. And so it's like I have a little bit of a fingernail to play with. They're just plastic finger picks, and I smooth them up, I round them up, so it's kind of rounded on the edge, but still left square, sort of like a fingernail would be, I suppose, if you clipped it off square. But so round corners, flat on the front, thinned just ever so slightly, and smooth. And it holds just fine. The thing I like about these Ernie Ball picks is that they're not like the Dunlops, in that they feel like they're trying to squeeze the life out of your finger. Although I know you can adjust the Dunlops, you can adjust all the picks, but this just saves me a step. I don't have to adjust anything. It's exactly the right tension.
Nice. And do you stuff your banjo or anything like that? Do you put anything in the back of it?
Here's my stuffing. My stuffing is a tack sponge. I use any kind of. I tell you what works well is that memory foam.
Right.
And you didn't hear this from me, but you can get samples of that stuff from the folks that make the mattresses and stuff. They'll send you samples, and they work perfectly but you can get enough from them in a sample that you got a couple of stuffings for banjos. But I use just the smallest little piece, like a 1x1 or 2x2 square of any kind of somewhat heavy foam, and I just put it in there to cut the overtones. I'm not trying to dampen it down. I just don't want it to ring to the point that all I can hear is the ring. You know, I want to hear I want to hear the metal, and I want to hear the wood, and I want to hear the head. I don't want to hear just the clang. You know,
Right,
I like
yeah.
to hear the nice vibration of all the parts.
Well, I want to bring in my colleague Jamie Laddie again and see if we have, because there's a couple chat channels that I can't see, and if there's any questions out there.
I just want to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on.
Yep.
I was having some audio things in the background there. It's that my other chat room's been a little quiet today. They've been engaged and watching everything that's going on. But I definitely encourage anyone to ask anything. There was a couple more that just came up in this one. B Peak, I think it is, asks, do you only use the index or do you use the middle also to play?
For the most part, I use the index as my lead finger, but I do use the middle finger as a brush, and I do kind of that round peak, or more. People sort of assume it's a round peak thing, but it's more a Fred Cockram specific thing, where you're using both fingers at once to do a chop. So I'm using the middle on the first string, the index on the second string, and if I have hit with an index and I need to move my index to a lower string, but I still need a note on that same string, I'll use my middle to catch that note. So I do use both, but not religiously. It's not like it's a set pattern. I try to put if I have a finger in a place, there's no point in moving another finger in that place. You know, it's kind of an economy of motion thing.
I think it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Kevin also asks, is there any way, and if it's okay with you, Riley, we'll post this in the video description, but can you remind the audience of the tuning that you were in? I think it was for Undone Sorrow.
Yeah, and it's still the same tuning I'm in now.
Okay.
It is G for the fifth string, E, A, D, and then E. Even though I'm tuned maybe a half step low, not on purpose. It just happens to be there, and I didn't tune up to pitch. So yeah,
Right.
I'm effectively in A modal,
Yep.
and then I take the fifth string down to match the third fret on the first string.
Got it. Yeah, we'll post that if that's okay with you. We'll put it in the description.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And you just have to know to play in that tuning that your one chord or your root chord is going to be. You have to hold a chord shape to get your one chord. So that is not, it's not an open tuning.
Yep.
You have to play closed chords.
Yeah.
It's the hard life, man. It's the hard life. Fiona McQuill, I think it is, asks, what is your favorite song to play? Which is going to be a massive question. Because
well, it depends on what hour of the day. I like to play Undone in Sorrow. I like to play Last Pale Light in the West. I really love playing one of the most fun tunes to play is a tune called Holly Ding.
Okay.
Which comes from Wade Ward over in Grayson County, Virginia. And I love Backstep Cindy, which is a tune like Holly Ding. It's just really hard to say what's my favorite tune to play. I love playing all those Doc Boggs songs, False Hearted Lover Blues and Oh Death and Country Blues and Prodigal Son and those kinds of things,
That's awesome. Yeah. Got a lot of people asking, or a couple asking if you want to do any Yngwie banjo covers.
Well, probably I would go more of the Eddie Van Halen route than total Yngwie, because I just don't have the effects processors.
Well, Ned Lubrecki has the EVH kind of crossfire. I was kind of joking in the chat there that we should do like a shell pink banjo with scalloped frets out, Yngwie style.
Yeah,
That would go down. Some great tapping and all kinds of fun stuff. Be fun.
Absolutely.
All right.
So how often do you hear traditional round pick banjo players utter the words Yngwie Malmsteen.
I gotta say,
over here.
yeah,
Just
but it's impressing me a lot. I will say, like I listening to you talk about him and like John Paul Jones and other people, like it's very clear that you've got like a pretty major crossover in musical tastes compared to what you actually play, which is how much of that kind of plays into what you do as an artist.
A lot, actually. It affords me the opportunity to be able to take the banjo into musical situations that if I played strictly traditional old time tunes, I would never have the opportunity to be part of. You know, I love music, and that's the thing. It's all music, and if I get caught up saying, "Well, I'm this kind of musician. I only play old time," well, man, that's limiting my world, and the world is just such a much bigger musical and cultural place. A lot of people get stuck in the place they are because they've never had the chance to see any other place, and it's not, you know, and that works physically and musically. So I've always loved country music. I've always liked rock music. I've always I had the violin when I was in school, you know, because it was one of the classes. It got you out of doing work, you know, it got you out of doing, you know, things where you had to actually think. You could play music, you know, you could take a music class. That's great. Let's do that instead of math. But
yeah, we've all been there, I think.
So I had violin, you know, and so I got exposed to classical music as a kid, but see, I was confused when I went into that. I thought they were going to teach me how to play fiddle, and because I didn't know that you could really play any other kind of music on the fiddle except country music. Country being, you know, old time bluegrass, Cajun, or Nashville country, you know. I soon discovered that Dvorak's Slavonic dances was not what I had signed on for. Although it was folk music, just folk music from another place.
That's right. You said before we went live today, you were talking a lot. I think you said your wife was British, and you tour there, hopefully annually. You know, pre-COVID. Kind of, have you gotten into kind of the Scottish Irish kind of scenes once you've been over there, jigs and reels and that kind of thing? And
well, I do end up playing a lot of the Northern English stuff. I have lots of friends who are English folk musicians, and I end up playing a lot in Ireland with folks when I go over there. We've got lots of friends who are Irish musicians, and I was introduced to a lot of those folks by Dirk Powell. Dirk Powell and Tim O'Brien and I went over there and on a tour for a couple of weeks, and that was sort of my introduction to the Irish scene, and had just a blast playing with all those folks, and you start, one of the things you discover is that lots of the tunes that we play in Southern Appalachia and specifically in the Blue Ridge have counterparts in the Irish or English or Scottish traditions. You know, it's like we play a tune called The Bell of Lexington, but you might find yourself in Ireland playing exactly the same tune and somebody calls it Kitty's Wedding, you know, that kind of thing. Same thing works with the Cajun crossovers too. They play a tune called Jetezo Ball, and we play a tune called Cindy. You know, they're basically the same tune, and they play Un Lieb Tabac in Cajun country, Pound of Tobacco, and we play Jack of Diamonds.
Interesting.
You know?
Dave, you're in Louisiana. Are you familiar with those tunes? And then...
Not so much. I don't know the Cajun repertoire deeply.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. Yeah, it's just fascinating to hear that, you know, the different crossovers and the different kind of approach to the same tune, but in a different fashion. That's very cool. Excellent. Kevin also asks, do you ever use nylon or Nile gut strings on your banjo, or are you strictly steel? Huh?
Not on purpose. Yeah, no, I'm not a huge fan of the gut or the Nile gut. I'm a steel string guy. I like the feeling. I like the vibration that I get with the steel. And as David and I were discussing earlier, I use a fairly heavy set for a medium set. So it's pretty well tensioned, But I like sort of the ring of the steel, and don't get me wrong, I do like the warmth and the depth that the nail gut provides. But just for the music that I play,
Yeah.
I don't really use the nail gut. Although I've made some banjos, and people asked me to use nail gut strings, and they were, they sound great, and I enjoyed playing them, but I don't have them
Yeah.
on my banjo.
It's definitely one of the more common questions we get, like as far as like how do we, particularly people who are beginning, they maybe pick up a good time or something, and they want to warm up the sound, and they kind of feel like automatically they have to go to that nylon string. But
Right.
kind of doing what you're doing with the mediums, or maybe something a little heavier, is often a really good result. And then the head, of course, playing into
Well,
that.
we were talking earlier in the green room, and I was saying how wonderful the Deering Good Time banjo is.
Hmm.
That's a great banjo, and with a few little tweaks, you maybe put a different head on it, maybe put a little tape under the bridge. See, I actually do that myself. I put a little piece of duct tape under the bridge. It thickens the head just a little bit, makes it a little mellower, gives it I don't know, gives it a more present tone rather than a ringy tone, a thump, if you will,
Yeah.
if you're into the thunk. Put a little bit of foam in there to stop some of the overtones, and I'm telling you, you've got a good banjo. The Deering Good Time is an awesome banjo.
We appreciate that soundbite. That's awesome. Thank you very much. That's that's what we try and do with a good time banjo. It's been around for so long because we really try to emphasize the playability, the quality of the parts, and we believe that if we have those things in place, then it's going to make you be able to play better, rather than struggle with a cheaper instrument, which is so often the case. It doesn't matter if it's a banjo or a guitar or whatever.
There's some banjos that are imported from other places
Mhm.
that are not so good, and they do not offer you the ability to have a banjo well into your playing. They might be a good starter, but it's a very difficult starter.
Yeah.
And then as you get better, you immediately want a new banjo because this one's not very good sounding anymore.
Mhm.
Well, the Good Time's not like that. The Good Time will provide you a nice sound well into your playing career.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
it's just a good solid banjo.
I
And
completely
I
agree.
commend you guys on the production of those things.
Well, thank you
I
very
I,
much.
I
Yeah.
tell people to get them all the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Your commission check will be on its way here very shortly.
Outstanding.
But you're absolutely right.
I say that free of charge, actually.
Good.
It's the way I really feel.
Cancel that check for Riley.
Yeah, right. Cancel that check for Riley Baugus.
You're absolutely right.
B-A-U-G-U-S. Yeah.
You're absolutely spot on. If you have a banjo or any instrument, if the tuners are not good or the action's so high and you're starting out, it's not so much that it's going to hinder your progress. So many people starting out just automatically believe that it's them. It's
That's
not
right.
the instrument, particularly if it's a banjo or an instrument that has like a well-known name on the headstock. That's
Right.
where we run into people because they associate that brand with the quality of the instruments maybe that they're much better known for, right?
Yep.
And so they pick up a
Yes.
banjo and assume that the quality is going to carry on through, and so oftentimes it doesn't, which is unfortunate. But they blame themselves and then they quit, and that's not good for anyone. We want more music. So
I was I was talking with Doc Watson. Doc and I were friends, and I was talking with him once, and I was saying, Doc, yeah, I said I did that old time thing where I ordered my first guitar out of the Sears Roebuck catalog, and I said it had that 0 fret, and I said the action was so high on that thing that the first night that I played it, I drew blood. I mean, I played until my fingers were bleeding. The action was so incredibly hard. And he said, "Oh, son," he said, "I had one of those." He said, "I had one of those guitars when I first started." He said, "It was like fretting a fence." And and that's the best analogy that I've ever heard about bad instruments. It's like fretting a fence.
yeah, it's fretting a fence. Spot on. And honestly, it's not just banjo. Like we're in the banjo world, and that's kind of what we're talking about. But I've been,
Right.
Dave and I have both been in this industry, musical instruments, for a long time. We've seen it all. It ranges from flutes to saxophones to guitars. The thing's still there. So the message is like, get the best you can afford. not the
Absolutely.
cheapest, because
That's right.
that extra $100-$200 on whatever the instrument might be is going to make a world of difference in your learning progress as you go along, and it's going to take you places that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get to. So
That is true. I can attest to that fact myself. I recently bought a new mandolin. It's not an expensive mandolin, but it's not an extremely inexpensive mandolin either. It's sort of it's a sort of a mid-rangey thing, and the ability to learn to play my ability to learn to play has increased exponentially because I have an instrument that actually is a joy to play. And I didn't buy the most expensive mandolin, and I didn't buy the cheapest. I've had the cheapest mandolin, and I assure you, it's not worth starting a fire with. But I have money in it, and I have to move it on to someone else who wants to learn. You know? But I can tell you, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. A better instrument will make you a better player.
yeah, yep. Best you can afford, not the cheapest.
That's
Doesn't
right.
have to
Best
be
you
the
can
most
afford.
expensive. Doesn't
That's
have to be
right.
the cheapest. Yeah, there's a
That's
a
right.
middle
And
ground.
it's not always the cost that makes the good instrument.
Mhm.
You know, as we're saying, it's not. You know, it can be. You can buy very expensive instruments that aren't very good.
Yeah.
or at least not like significantly better than
Right.
something
Yeah,
else.
that's
in
what
the
I
line.
mean. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
but they're not significantly better.
Yeah.
You know, a few $100s more to buy a thing doesn't mean that it's going to be a few $100s better.
Nope. Nope.
Right.
It just means it's going to
Right.
have some fancier inlays, maybe, or
That's
something like
right.
that.
Yeah, because inlay is what makes a banjo sound good.
We've been working on this like acoustically tuned inlay lately. It's in the R&D shop, and I guarantee tomorrow my customer service team will have a bunch of emails saying, "Hey, well, tell me more about this inlay." It's going to be cool. April Fool's coming around the block here real quick.
There you go.
All right, just looking at my other chat screen here. Dave, is there anything else you wanted to throw in?
This is great though. Really had a great time hanging and listening to you. But I'd
Yeah.
love to hear another song if we have time.
Oh, well, I was going to just chime in there. Jim on the other chat here, he's saying, Riley, if you don't mind retuning, I'd love to hear a Doc Boggs song. Maybe Bright Sunny South of Prodigal Son from Jim Bowman.
How about rather than one of those, maybe I will do. I'll gladly, Jim. I will gladly do a Doc Boggs. Let me not do one of those two though.
Well, Jim, I think Jim's going to be fine with that.
Yeah,
Riley Boggs is
he likes
a.
banjos. Jim Bowman likes banjos. I hear.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Just a few.
But Riley is a man of the people, and he will deliver. So while Riley's tuning up there, let's just kind of summarize. It's been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed listening to most of it, and I've enjoyed kind of contributing to the end.
You didn't enjoy listening to all of it? You just
No, just
most of it.
the bits that I wasn't
Sorry, I
in.
had to say that.
Fine, it's fine. It's the British humor in both of us, I think.
It's like when you say somebody says, "Well, how are you?" You say, "Oh, not too bad," which means it's bad, but not bad enough to be detrimental, right?
Yeah, I've got a very bad habit of doing that. Actually, I should probably stop that.
No, I actually stole that from Bill Bailey. So,
Who's in his own right a genius. If you don't mind my saying as well, you're a very positive person.
oh, thank you.
You're kind of exuding like just this general positivity and happiness. And then on a couple of occasions during the conversation where you kind of picked up on yourself, like maybe pointing something out that maybe like interpreted as negative, you corrected yourself, and it was great. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
we need more of that.
Well, thank you. And the statements that I was making were I wasn't actually. I wasn't trying to correct it. It was just like, no, I don't want to be. I don't want that statement to sound like that. No, there are times when I'll definitely have a negative statement and mean it that way. But I just didn't want to be misinterpreted. Yeah. Don't
By the way,
misunderstand me. Yeah.
I also like that.
Underestimate me neither. Yeah, right.
I also like that you refer to our backstage area as a green room. It adds so much more like allure to the whole Deering Live experience.
Well, yeah, actually,
The green room looks a lot like this.
Yeah, well, it's green. It's one of the few green rooms I've been in lately that's green.
2 shades of green,
Yeah.
actually. There we go.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. That was a really, really fun conversation. What are you going to see us out with here, Riley?
How about maybe Danville Girl? How about that?
I'm for it.
That's good.
All right. Take it away, Sarah. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. This episode will be live in about 2 minutes after it ends, so you can rewatch it to your heart's content. See you next time.
Let me just say thank you guys for having me. I've had such a good time being here. I've looked forward to it ever since we set it up, and I've had lots of people contacting me saying that they were excited about it, and you guys are doing a great thing here. This is really nice. It's really
Awesome.
nice.
Thank you. We love doing it, and it's really fun to have people like yourself on. So keep doing what you're doing, and we'll see you down the road, sir.
Thank you. I have no choice.
We're with you. We're with you.
I went down to Danville. I got stuck on a Danville girl. You bet your life she's out of sight. She wears those Danville curls. She wears her hair on the back of her head like all highborn people do. And the very next train that leaves this town gonna bid that girl adieu. I don't see why I love that girl, for she never cared for me. But still my mind is on that girl, wherever she may be. That's 40 miles through the rock and 60 through the sand. Now I relate to you the life of many a lovesick man. I'm standing around the old platform, smoking a cheap cigar and waiting on a local to catch an empty car. I'm sitting on the old platform, resting my poor tired feet. I'm 900 miles away from home and not a bite to eat. Look up, look down that lonesome road. Hang down your head